Okay, welcome back. We're talking about just the template that we use to produce web pages. Now, this template doesn't exactly match what they have in the book, so I'm going to tweak that. I'm going to go here to the HTML part and basically put what's called an attribute. And so there's an attribute called lang, and then I can tell it EN for English. Notice how the machine kind of helped me out. And another thing I'm going to do a little different here is I'm going to take that backslash out. Okay, now it actually matches what we have in the book. So this is what's called an attribute. And so attributes basically, so a tag can optionally have attributes. In this particular case, it's an attribute telling me that I'm using English. And this meta tag is one of those, what's called a self-closing tag. This is the first of the self-closing tags that we're going to have in the course, or at least this chapter rather. And this is one of those tags where there's no need to have a closing tag. It's perfectly okay. Now, by convention, and in fact, I will probably do this half the time, I just out of habit like to put a slash there, and that's kind of like a mental way of saying, no, I didn't make a mistake. Now, admittedly, you could leave it off. You very well could leave it off. But when I look at these pages and I'm hunting for opening and closing tags, I want to be visually assured somehow that that's not a mistake. So that's the way they do it in the book, but quite frankly, I'll probably do it that way. But either way, it's still called a self-closing or self-terminating tag. In other words, there's not a pair of them. There isn't a pair of meta tags. There's only one. Okay. Whew. All right. Let's continue. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to introduce yet another tag. This tag is called a heading tag. And just like you'd expect if I was to create a heading in a Microsoft Word document, it'll make things like, bold or something. Okay, so I'm going to use H. And so there's multiple levels of heading. So an H1 would be like, this is a heading. I'm going to go ahead and do another one just for the heck of it. I'm going to do like, I don't know, an H3 and say, this is another heading. All right, I'm going to render this in the browser, see what it looks like. And not too surprising, I have two different headings. In bold, larger letters and in bold. And this one looks like it's just bold, maybe a little bit larger than that text. It's kind of hard to tell. But so that's what headings are. There's H1 through H6, so you can kind of pick the level of heading you want. Now, later on, not this time, but later on, we're going to be talking about how you can use headings for accessibility reasons. So they're kind of sort of required later on because you want to break up your document into chunks. This talks about this, paragraph, and then you have a heading and another paragraph or two. But right now, it's just kind of decorations. Now, I've already used this thing called a paragraph tag before, but let me just get into it one more time. So a paragraph tag. What a paragraph tag does is create what's called a block. And a block means all the text in there fits into, has a blank line above and a blank line below, and all the lines kind of wrap around, just like you would expect a paragraph to do in word processing, right? So I'm just going to type a bunch of junk in here. I don't know, Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and I guess it doesn't matter if it's spelled right, does it? Everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. Okay, all right. I'm going to render that in the browser. And here we go. So I guess I need to have more lines to show you what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to grab this and just kind of copy and paste it over and over and over so I have a lot of text. Okay? Since you don't want to see me sit here and type all this time, do you? So just for the heck of it, I'm pasting like a gazillion of these things. All right, one more time. So, all right. So it put this thing together and it wrapped the words around, didn't it? Now this was one giant line in here, right? One giant line, and yet it automatically broke them up. It put a white space before, a blank line before, and a blank line after, and did its own wrapping. All right, let's go in here and do something different. I'm going to go here and add a couple spaces. Before, on the first lamb, I'm going to add like 3-4 spaces. Okay, so Mary had a little space lamb. Okay, you guys ready? Are you ready? And if you say, I don't see any difference, then you are correct. Actually, I did get a difference because of the comma. But this is what's called white space collapsing. Multiple white spaces get collapsed into one. So you know how maybe you were taught when you were writing sentences many years ago, like in typing class or English or whatever, you're told to like put 2 spaces at the end of a period, for the next line. Maybe you were taught that. If you did that here, it's going to take the 2 spaces out, because 2 spaces or 3 or 5 or 16 get collapsed into one. All right, just telling you. Now I'm going to do something a little weirder here. I'm going to go here. I'm going to put this back to the way it was. Okay, so I'm just going to go here and put a cutter. I don't like this. I can't see the whole line, so I'm just going to put a carriage return right there. Doink. And maybe another one right there, so I can actually see the text. Wouldn't that be kind of nice? Because having one giant line that goes out there is pretty doggone annoying, isn't it? Okay, so Mary had a little lamb, so I'm expecting that the first line is going to end up on the word when. Right? Because I broke it up. All right, let's try it. And if you said, gee, I don't see any differences, you'd be correct again. There are no differences. Why? Well, I just told you. The white space gets collapsed. So when you put something in a paragraph, for example, by the way, now that this paragraph is kind of sort of long, wouldn't this be a good opportunity to kind of clean this up a little bit, like put the paragraph tags, and I'm going to do a little magic here, and I'm going to do a tab. Okay, so now it looks a little better. It doesn't render any differently. It just looks a little better. I kind of messed it up on the beginning, but who cares? All right. So the rule is whenever you have white space, it's ignored. Multiple white spaces ignored. So these carriage returns in here don't show up in the rendered page. So you can make this look as formatted as you want here, but that is not how it's going to show up at the other end. Okay, just telling you. So I told you that there's a blank line at the top and a blank line at the bottom. Let's do another paragraph and say this is paragraph 2. Now, if there's a blank line at the bottom of this paragraph and a blank line at the top of this paragraph, does that mean I'm going to have 2 blank lines? What do you think? Well, let's take a peek. And the answer is no. It collapses those 2 things together. It saw that this paragraph had a blank line, and it saw that this paragraph had a blank line at the top, and it goes, well, look, we got one at the bottom, we got one at the top. So we're just going to have collapse them together and just have a combination of just one blank line. Okay, that's what that means. Now, this is kind of funky, and I don't like this example that he used, but they have an example in the book using an attribute, and it's for aligning text. Okay, now do not use this ever, because it's not compliant with HTML5. So shame on them for showing you something that's not compliant. But for demonstrating an attribute, it kind of sort of works. So I'm going to show you how you can create an attribute, and I'll show you what the attribute does, but don't you ever do this. Okay, I know it's a little crazy. So I'm going to go to this paragraph right here and add an attribute. So remember, attributes, like up here, attributes happen inside the beginning tag. All right, they never appear at the ending tag. They're always inside the beginning tag. So I put a space in there. And then the name of the attribute is always lowercase. So in this case, I'm going to do one called align. And then always followed by an equal sign. And then followed by something inside text. Now I'm going to say center here. Okay, so what I've created is an attribute called the align attribute. Then I'm going to have an equal sign, and then I'm going to have some text. Now, what if this was a number? Would I still have to put that in quotation marks? Yeah, it's all text. All right, now let me just show you this to show you what it looks like. And it's centered paragraph 2. Woohoo! But once again, don't you do this. All right, we're going to show you the right way to do it later. In fact, I'm not even going to leave that on the screen. I'm kind of annoyed at the textbook that they did that. Bottom line is attributes. Let's go back to this example. So it's a lowercase equal sign, something inside quotes. If you can remember that, you're in good shape. That's what attributes are all about. All right. Now let's talk about, well, what if I really did want this to break right here? I really did want the paragraph to stop. I mean the line to stop at the word when. Well, then I have to add something in there. There's a thing called a break. And so I go here and I just add this thing called BR. Now, this machine is just configured to do the little backslash thing. Remember I told you about how, and again, this is still a self-closing tag, and that backslash is not required. But again, for sanity's sake, when you do a BR like this, it's a good visual reminder that you didn't accidentally miss a tag. So I kind of like it, even though that's not required by the standard and it's not in the way they do it in the book. All right, I only did it once. Okay, one BR in there. Let's go render this in the page. Ta-da! And it stopped right where it's supposed to. Okay, so if I want a paragraph break to happen, it's up to me to put it where I want it. Because otherwise it's going to just, it's called flow control. It's going to start on one margin and flow all the way to the next margin and then wrap around and continue going. That's just the way it was set up. So if you don't like that, then you can use a break. Cool. A lot of people, if you don't need breaks, for example, breaks in the output, a lot of people use line breaks here just so they can see things. I mean, I don't want to have to scoot over like on my, so it's just visual, right? Pick a thing. If you were going to be printing this, not the rendered page, but printing the HTML page, maybe you ought to have something like 80 columns or 80 something so that it would not wrap around on a printed page, things like that. But again, that has nothing to do with how it looks on the page, on the web browser. That's just you, right? Remember, because the browser doesn't care. You might care, but the browser doesn't care if there's a line break there or not. Okay, cool. So let's introduce one more thing. On page 38, they talk about a new tag called a block quote. So I'm going to grab all of this. I'm going to go in here. And you know how up to now the tags have been rather short? Like head and HTML and body and P and H1, right? And even BR for break. So wouldn't you think that block quote would be something like BQ, right? No. It's the entire word block quote. Why? I'm not exactly certain. So I'm just going to go grab everything here so I can show you the difference between, I'm going to stick it right there. Okay, so I'm going to render that in the browser and let's see what it did. See what the difference is. Aha, there's a difference. What the block quote did, it maintained that the blank line to top, blank line to bottom thing. But what it did is it did an indentation on both ends. It did an indentation on the right and an indentation on the left. Okay, so all it did was just squish in the margins temporarily. And so that's a block quote. Kind of cool. I like it. That's an easy one. And the only thing weird about block quote is the fact that the term is so dang long. I mean, they could have made it a lot shorter, but hey, what the heck. Hey, they didn't ask me. Okay, this is a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark. Let's pick this thing up again in just a few.